Welcome, I'm Millicent Walker. Tonight, eminent Nigerians insist on restructuring of Nigeria as they gather at the annual Akintola Williams Foundation lecture. National Orientation Agency raises alarm over continued hate speeches by Nigerians, says trend has assumed disturbing dimension. Federal government vows full implementation of the Economic Recovery Growth Plan as acting president insists the Buhari administration will deliver on its promises. And President Trump reacts to North Korea's missile threat, warns Pyongyang over planned strike on Guam.
And on business news tonight, Bankers Committee of the CBN sets aside 26 billion naira for small and medium entrepreneurs in Nigeria's agricultural and equity sectors.
And in sports news, Senegalese club US Wakam banned for 7 years following crowd trouble that left 8 people dead during a cup final last month.
And from Abuja, the leadership of the People's Democratic Party promises to resolve the crisis in the party's Southwest chapter ahead of its national convention on Saturday.
We begin tonight with renewed calls for restructuring Nigeria by some elder statesmen and thought leaders. To them, restructuring Nigeria may be the only viable option for the country to make progress in its developmental quest. Well, one of them is the former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Mr. Emeka Anyaoku, who insists that Nigeria must restructure to avoid disintegration. Well, on his part, former UN Under-Secretary General, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, is of the belief that implementing a restructured governance may start with ideas from the various fora on the subject and not through another national conference. The thought leaders gave the unanimous opinion at the second annual lecture of Akintola Williams Foundation in Lagos.
Akintola Williams Foundation annual lecture focuses on advancing education for professionals across different backgrounds and promoting public policy discussions.
And then went on to...
The discourse this year comes with a difference.
Last year, the topic was Nigeria yesterday, today and tomorrow. And now it is re-establishing Nigeria's leadership position in the world. We're all very unhappy about how our position has dropped over the last few years.
The lecture is held in honor of the doyen of accountancy profession, Mr. Akintola Williams, who recently turned 98 years. He applauds the courage of the organizer.
I am amazed at the speed with which Chief Mrs. Olaore got things organized. This is not our first assignment. She is noted for starting projects and seeing those projects go through.
Renowned diplomat Professor Ibrahim Gambari and former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Chief Emeka Anyaoku, as well as the former Vice Chancellor of Obafemi Awolowo University, Professor Wale Omole, are the thought leaders for this forum. For Professor Gambari, it's time to take Nigeria back from persons who seek to divide Nigerians along ethnic lines and polarize the country.
Despite the occasional discordant voices raised largely by individuals and groups whose economic, political, sectarian, and often personal interests are denied or perceived to be denied. And in this regard, I'm on record as saying that we have to put in their place professional Northerners, professional Yorubas, professional Igbos, professional minorities who have made the championing of ethnicity their career. We have to take our nation back from them.
Highlighting the milestones of Nigeria's development underscored by the nation's historical processes, Chief Anyaoku, who also took time to shower some accolades on Mr. Williams, concludes that it's inevitable to restructure the country at this point in time.
He is a respected elder statesman and philanthropist, and one of his most enduring legacies is this venue where we are today. To achieve greater political stability and deserving socio-economic development in the country, thereby tackling the worsening challenges it currently faces in many sectors, Nigeria must restructure its present governance architecture. And it must do so by returning to the true federalism.
True federalism may not be possible without a new constitution, a position that Professor Omole doubts the current legislature can achieve.
This is not about modifying constitution. We need a new constitution. The people there are not capable.
The leaders, however, believe that realizing these suggestions requires building a consensus on the matter across all segments of the federation.
We've had more than enough confab. We should look at all what we have, all these conferences, distill from them, then have a national conversation. It can take many forms. I think some element of that is already beginning.
The federating units become responsible for education, for example, and health and public services. They will be able to provide opportunities for the young people.
Until we ourselves are good within our country, the international world will not respect us. And so we must carry ourselves to the level of being a country to be proud of, a country to look up to. And it's then and only then with the international community, which is the world we're trying to reposition in, only then will they look at us and admire us and give us the respect we want.
The speakers are also honored for their contribution to nation building. As the debate on restructuring continues, the need to build a national consensus towards redefining Nigeria's political and economic landscape as put forward here may be the most reasonable direction to follow. Temple Ashaju, Channels Television News.
The growing trend of hate speeches in Nigeria is becoming a source of worry to the leadership of the National Orientation Agency. Now, the Director General of the agency, Dr. Buhari, is asking all state directors of the NOA and community orientation and mobilization officers to begin peace-building sensitization and advocacy from one community to the other. He wants them to assure settler communities of government's commitment to their safety and security.
Our concern is that the social fabric of our nation is being ruined and we stand at risk of an impending crisis in the face of unchecked hate and divisive speeches. Nigerians risk the loss of their freedoms if the current ugly trend of hate speeches is allowed to snowball into a war situation. The current ongoing altercations and the vituperations of hate across the country by individuals, well-known leaders, religious leaders, groups of persons and the organizations have a strong foreboding of a looming disaster. If we allow our country to be flung into a crisis just because of the antics of an irresponsible few, none of us will be spared of the deadly destructive effects. You will all recall that the 30-month civil war of July 1967 to January 1970, in which over 2 million of our compatriots lost their lives, was preceded and started by intolerance and a series of hate pronouncements, hate speeches, hate conducts, and hate actions inflicted upon one another by the citizens.
The acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, is talking tough. This time, he wants all cabinet members to be more disciplined in the drive to achieving set goals. He says governments will no longer tolerate excuses that suggest that progress is not attainable in Nigeria. The acting president says, quote, "We simply have to accept that there is nothing Nigerian about failure, because as we know in our personal lives, failure and success are commodities on offer to everyone all over the world, and every individual and every country makes a choice of which to buy, and I will say on our behalf that we will choose success," end of quote. Professor Osinbajo was speaking at a cabinet retreat on the economic recovery growth plan and preparations for the 2018 budget in Abuja, where a former top official of the Malaysian government was one of the guest speakers. Still on the economy, another fallout of the federal cabinet retreat held today in Abuja is the reassurance from the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Udo Udoma, that government would not relent in its drive to attaining its economic recovery and growth plan. Mr. Udoma says government agencies have a big role to play in helping the country achieve its socio-economic development targets.
The need to ensure full and faithful implementation of the economic recovery and growth plan, because the government is committed to the transformation of Nigeria. The government is committed to bring the change that we promised. And this is part of that exercise. We brought together all the members of the cabinet, as well as permanent secretaries and heads of agencies, to work out and to begin the process continue the process of plan implementation.
Minister of Budget and National Planning, Udo Udoma, speaking there. It's a day of protest in Abuja today as two groups march the streets of the Federal Capital Territory, disrupting free flow of traffic. Their agenda is closely related, but they disagree in one thing: the president's continued absence from the country for more than 90 days. The first group has been protesting for 4 days, demanding more explanation on the president's health, and they are asking him to return to Nigeria or resign. But the other group disagrees. They do not see any wrong in the president's absence from the country, since, according to them, he handed over to the vice president.
The Unity Fountain in Abuja, originally symbolizing unity of the nation, has become a center of protest over President Buhari's absence from the country, including these three groups, one calling for the president's resignation, while the other two are instead asking Nigerians to pray for the president's recovery. Led by Nigeria's popular entertainer Charlie Boy, the Concerned Nigerians group enter their fourth day of their resume or resign campaign.
It's either our president resume or resign. Simple. What do we want? Resume or resign. What do we want? Resume or resign. Our mumu don't do. Our mumu don't do.
94 days is too long for the president to say he's still thinking, because we saw a report yesterday saying that the president is considering resignation. Come on. 94 days, the president is still considering resignation. The president should do the honorable thing. He cannot continue in office. They are holding Nigeria to ransom.
At the other end of the Unity Fountain, two pro-Buhari protesters also gather for a march in support of the president. For these protesters, President Buhari's absence has not created a vacuum in government.
What we are saying is that there's no vacuum in government, and we are deploring, we are condemning the mischievous call by this group of people that President Muhammadu Buhari should resign because he's on medical vacation. What we need to do at this point in time is to continue to pray for him.
President Muhammadu Buhari transmitted letter to the National Assembly before he left this country for his medical follow-up.
The two pro-Buhari groups then file onto the streets and march to a 3-armed zone that leads to the presidential villa. Here, the protesters insist that President Buhari has not breached the constitution despite his absence for over 90 days. President Buhari's medical vacation to the United Kingdom since the 7th day of May 2017 has generated much debate in the media, but political analysts are now expressing concern over the increasing protests that the situation has generated.
Against the backdrop of persistent calls by protesters calling for the resignation or resumption of the president, the senior special assistant to the president on media and publicity has assured that attempts to derail the war against corruption will not succeed. Mr. Garba Shehu, in a statement, dismissed the return or resign agitation, describing it as an illegal assembly organized to derail the war against corruption. He says, quote, "They want to distract us, but what the acting president wants to assure patriotic citizens is that the government will not bend." He continues by saying, quote, as far as the president is concerned, he has done the needful by handing the reins of authority to the vice president. Since the law of the country does not give a time limit for the president's return, it cannot be imposed by a saber-rattling group or individual. End of quote. In part 2, after the break, we turn to issues surrounding Nigeria's electricity supply challenges amidst reports of wasted huge financial investments in the sector. Please stay with us.